are forged in blood. July 19th wasn't just another UFC fight night. It was a funeral for one of the sport's most beloved warriors. The cage door didn't just close on another main event, it closed on an era. No more walkouts to James Brown, no more post-fight speeches soaked in blood and honesty. That was the last time we'll ever see Dustin Poirier inside the Octagon.
Thank you for what you've done for the game, for showing the average guy that if you work hard at anything, you can get to the top and shine bright like a diamond. So thank you, Dustin Poirier.
They say diamonds are forever, and sure the one is from Lafayette, Louisiana. Give it up for the diamond of Lafayette, Dustin Poirier.
And he didn't leave with a belt, he left with something heavier, something sharper, respect, carved into the skin of every man he ever went to war with. This is the story of how a scrappy Louisiana brawler became one of the most revered names in combat sports without ever becoming undisputed champion. A man who lost, bled, and suffered publicly, but never stopped walking forward. This is the legacy of the Diamond. And if this really was the end, it was the most Dustin Poirier ending imaginable.
Dustin Poirier didn't walk into the UFC with hype behind him. He wasn't a blue-chip prospect or some undefeated phenom with a flashy highlight reel. He was raw, a brawler from Lafayette, Louisiana, with heavy hands, a strong chin, and a chip on his shoulder the size of a cinder block. And in those early featherweight days, that was enough. He fought like every paycheck depended on a bonus, and it often did. His style was chaotic, emotional, and at times reckless, but it made him unforgettable. People didn't watch Poirier for technique. They watched because they knew someone was going to bleed, and usually it was both guys.
Every single person from Louisiana is proud of you. Hell, DP, the world's proud of you. Congratulations.
But under the surface of all that wild aggression, something was missing. His record at featherweight was solid, 8 wins, 3 losses, but every time he got close to breaking through to the elite, he stumbled. In his last 7 fights at 145, he went 4-3. Good, not great. And the moment that defined this chapter of his career, a brutal, calculated loss to a young Conor McGregor. That fight exposed Poirier, not just as a fighter, but as a person. It wasn't just the knockout, it was the mind games, the psychological warfare. Conor didn't just beat him, he dismantled him before they ever touched gloves. And in the cruel spotlight of MMA, that kind of humiliation sticks. Critics labeled him a gatekeeper, the kind of guy who could give you a good fight but never win the big one. Just another name on the list, a durable test, nothing more. And maybe they were right, because at 145, Dustin Poirier had hit a wall. His cuts to featherweight were hellish. The weight was draining him, his confidence was battered, and whether he admitted it or not, something had to change because the sport was starting to pass him by. But that was the last time anyone ever counted him out. In 2015, Dustin Poirier made the decision that would change everything. He left featherweight behind. No more brutal weight cuts that left him weak and drained. No more killing himself to fit into a division where his body didn't belong. At 155 pounds, he looked and fought like a new man. But it wasn't just physical. Something had shifted mentally. The doubt was gone. The hesitations buried. This version of Poirier didn't just want to win. He wanted to erase who he used to be. From the moment he stepped back into the cage, you could feel it. The violence didn't stop. If anything, it got worse, but now it was calculated, controlled chaos. His boxing was sharper, his footwork smarter, his chin granite, and that left hand, it came with bad intentions every time. He wasn't just winning, he was breaking people. Anthony Pettis finished. Eddie Alvarez broken. Justin Gaethje outlasted in a war so brutal it left both men limping out of the cage. That run turned Poirier into must-watch TV. Every time his name was on a card, fans knew they were getting blood, fire, and a possible fight of the year contender. He wasn't just climbing the ranks, he was torching them.
But here's the wild part. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't trying to be a star. He was fighting like a man trying to prove something to himself, to silence the voices that called him a gatekeeper, to make sure nobody ever put him in the almost column again. The UFC started to take notice. The fans, they already knew. Dustin Poirier had finally arrived, and this time, he wasn't just another contender. He was a problem. By 2019, Dustin Poirier wasn't asking for respect anymore. He was taking it. The UFC finally gave him what he had earned through blood and grit, a shot at gold. Not the undisputed title, but the interim lightweight championship. And standing across from him was Max Holloway, the featherweight king, riding one of the longest active win streaks in the sport. This wasn't just a fight. It was a clash of momentum, of pressure, of two men who refused to break.
UFC 236 wasn't supposed to be Dustin's coronation. The odds favored Holloway. The analysts called him too technical, too polished. But none of that mattered when the cage door shut. From the first round, it was clear this wasn't the same Poirier the world had doubted.
I want my legacy to be somebody who gave it his all.
He dropped Holloway early and often. His power was overwhelming. His pace, unrelenting. And when Max fired back, as he always does, Poirier didn't flinch. He bit down, stood in the fire, and threw harder. 5 rounds of war. No quit, no backing down, just two men bleeding for legacy. But only one walked away with the belt. Dustin Poirier, interim lightweight champion of the world. He didn't scream, he didn't dance. He held the belt with quiet pride, like a man who had finally arrived at the place he always believed he belonged. And for the first time, the world agreed. Dustin Poirier wasn't a gatekeeper. He wasn't a brawler with heart. He was a championship-level killer. But the road to undisputed greatness was about to get a lot darker. Winning the interim belt was a triumph, but the real test was waiting. And his name was Khabib Nurmagomedov, undisputed champion, undefeated monster. The kind of fighter who didn't just win, he dominated. When Dustin Poirier stepped into the cage at UFC 242, it was more than a unification bout. It was a collision with history. And for a brief moment, it looked like the unthinkable might happen.
Khabib now on the retreat.
In the second round, Poirier locked in a deep guillotine choke. The crowd held its breath. Khabib winced. Dustin squeezed with everything he had left. But Khabib didn't tap. He slipped out like smoke through fingers. Minutes later, the fight was over. Submission loss. Another name added to Khabib's flawless list. And for Dustin, another mountain that had chewed him up and spit him out. But he didn't sulk. He didn't disappear. He went right back to work. Because that's who Poirier was. A builder. A fighter who didn't fold under pressure. He learned from it. 2 years later, he earned a second shot at undisputed gold, this time against Charles Oliveira, a different kind of champion, a man who had walked through his own fire and come out sharp. Again, Poirier started strong, dropped Charles, hurt him, pressed the action. But as the rounds wore on, the tide turned. Oliveira dragged him into deep water, clenched, grappled, pressured, and once again, Dustin was forced to tap. Another submission, another championship heartbreak. But what made Poirier different was what came after. He never made excuses. He never blamed the matchups, the style, the pressure. He shouldered every failure like a scar, visible, painful, but worn with pride. Because win or lose, Dustin Poirier always came back. And the next time he returned, he didn't just want redemption, he wanted revenge.
I'm a fan of the sport, so when guys like Bisping, Robbie Lawler, Charles get their hands around a belt, overcoming, when those guys make things like that happen, and it's a special, special night.
In MMA, you don't always get a second chance. The opportunity he never expected, a rematch. But this wasn't the same Dustin, and it sure as hell wasn't the same Conor. Gone was a brash young fighter who had let McGregor live in his head. This version of Poirier was calm, surgical, and loaded with bad intentions. And when they met again at UFC 257, the world watched in disbelief. Dustin dismantled him. He chopped McGregor's legs to pieces, took away his power, and finished him with a flurry that left no doubt. Knockout. Statement made. But the rivalry wasn't done. 6 months later, the trilogy was set. UFC 264, primetime, all eyes on them. And Conor, he went back to the trash talk they never expected. Unshakable, grounded, unbothered. In the first round, Poirier dominated again, took McGregor down, landed vicious elbows, controlled every second. Then, in one brutal instant, McGregor stepped back and snapped his leg. Just like that, it was over. Technical TKO. Poirier wins the trilogy. Conor is carted off in silence. And Dustin, he doesn't even gloat. Because this was never about revenge. It was about closure. He had beaten the ghost that haunted his career. The man who mocked his city, questioned his heart, and made millions off his pain. And now, Poirier had sent him packing. Possibly for good, but the win meant more than just bragging rights. It cemented Dustin as a superstar, a pay-per-view headliner, a top-tier lightweight who had earned every inch of the spotlight. No more gatekeeper, no more almost. Dustin Poirier was now the man everyone wanted, but no one wanted to fight. After the McGregor trilogy, Poirier was on top of the world, but the climb wasn't over. There was still one goal left unclaimed. The undisputed lightweight title. He had already held the interim belt, already beaten some of the division's most dangerous names. But to silence the final doubt, he had to conquer the mountain that stood in front of every lightweight, the champion. First, it was Charles Oliveira, and that ended in heartbreak. But Poirier didn't quit. He regrouped, refocused, and came back with another run. He took on Michael Chandler, a whirlwind of chaos and power.
Oh! Poirier's all over him! Dustin late in the round.
That fight could have gone either way in the first round, but Dustin weathered the storm and broke Chandler down with that same steady pressure we'd seen for years. Another war, another win. Then came the final test, Islam Makhachev, a new champion, a new nightmare. It was Poirier's third attempt at undisputed gold, the final shot. At UFC 302, Dustin came in knowing exactly what was on the line. Not just a belt, but his legacy. One last chance to etch his name in history as a true champion. And once again, he gave everything. Poirier fought with heart, timing, and grit. He stuffed takedowns, landed clean shots, made Islam earn every inch. But in the fifth round, the fight slipped away. Islam got the takedown, found the neck, and just like that, it was over. Another submission, another loss, but something was different this time. There was no shame, no regret. Poirier sat in the cage, bloodied and spent, and told the world what he already knew. I think this might be it. I've got nothing left to prove. And he was right. He didn't need a belt to validate the warpath he had carved through one of the toughest divisions in MMA history. He had already earned his place through battles, not trophies. And yet, he had one final request before walking away. Not a title, not a rematch, a homecoming. After nearly 2 decades in the fight game, Dustin Poirier had nothing left to prove except to himself. He didn't want to fade into the background or quietly announce his retirement on social media. He wanted a proper goodbye. In his own words, in his own cage, in front of his own people. So he made a simple request to the UFC. Let me fight one last time in Louisiana, and let me go out the way I came in, swinging. The UFC listened, and the opponent, a perfect full-circle moment, Max Holloway. More than a decade earlier, Holloway had made his UFC debut against Poirier and lost by submission. Since then, Max had become a champion, a legend, and a fan favorite in his own right. Now they would meet again, not as rookies, but as warriors, as brothers of battle. Holloway holding the BMF title, Poirier carrying a legacy, and both men knowing this wasn't just about belts. It was about closure. UFC 318 was booked in New Orleans. For the first time in a decade, the UFC was returning to Louisiana, and it wasn't a coincidence. It was for Dustin. The build-up to fight night felt different. No trash talk, no bad blood, just respect, nostalgia, and a quiet understanding between two men who had been through hell in the cage and come out the other side changed. The fans knew it too. This wasn't just another main event. This was a farewell. This was a tribute. This was Dustin Poirier's final walk. Dustin Poirier walked to the Octagon not as a contender, not even as a title hopeful, but as a man ready to close the book on his own terms. No pressure, no future to chase, just one last dance in the fire. Across from him stood Max Holloway, the BMF champ, rejuvenated, hungry, and dangerous. But this fight wasn't about rankings or resumes. It was about heart. From the opening bell, they gave us everything. Punches traded, chins tested, moments of pure chaos. It wasn't clean, it wasn't careful, and that's why it was unforgettable. Poirier didn't coast, he didn't play it safe. In front of his home crowd, in his final ride,
Dustin Poirier has done just about everything. He has been around for a long time. From the skinny 145-pound kid that
he chose violence. He pushed forward 8 shots, landed bombs, got dropped, got back up, his face bloodied, his legs wobbling. But that signature grit, still there, still unbreakable. Max Holloway matched him step for step, volume, precision, endurance. It was the kind of war that hurts both men, but builds something immortal. 5 rounds of carnage, 5 rounds of history. And when the final horn sounded, the Superdome shook.
Holloway got the win. Scorecards confirmed it, but nobody was talking about that
Because everyone knew this night belonged to Dustin. The UFC had brought an entire event to Louisiana for one reason: to let the diamond shine one last time. And under those lights, bleeding, battered, arms raised in farewell, he did. There was no belt around his waist, but there was something heavier: the respect of every single person watching. When the blood dried and the cage emptied, something lingered in the air. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't loss, it was reverence. Dustin Poirier didn't walk away with a belt strapped to his waist or a perfect record etched into history. What he walked away with was rarer, something no scorecard could ever measure: legacy.
He was never the most athletic, never the fastest, never the most hyped, but somehow Dustin became the soul of an entire division. A man who showed us what it meant to fight with purpose, fight with pain, fight with peace. He didn't need trash talk to sell tickets. He didn't need controversy to stay relevant. He earned respect the hard way, through broken hands, stitched faces, and walkouts that felt like war marches. And the UFC knew it. They didn't bring an event back to New Orleans after 10 years because it made financial sense. They did it because Dustin Poirier meant something to Louisiana, to the sport, to the fans who watched him rise, fall, and rise again. He wasn't a placeholder. He wasn't a side character. He was a standard, a fighter's fighter, a blueprint for what this game demands and what it gives back. So now we want to hear from you. What does Dustin Poirier mean to you? What moment will you remember most from his legendary career? Drop it in the comments. We're reading every single one. And if you love stories like this about the blood, the sacrifice, and the legends who shaped the fight game, make sure to hit subscribe and join us here at Octagon Insider, because the next great story is already on its way. But for now, we say thank you to the man from Lafayette, to the warrior who gave us everything, to Dustin the Diamond Poirier.